The sun has not yet fully risen over Kurukshetra. Two armies stand arrayed across from one another. This is the concept the text calls asakti, the sticking, the clinging, the almost involuntary adhesion of the self to its actions and their outcomes. The Gita's teaching is sometimes called anasakti yoga, the yoga of non-attachment. Mahatma Gandhi, in his 1929 Gujarati commentary on the Gita, used precisely this framing. And he was careful, as Krishna is careful, to distinguish anasakti from indifference. This is not the life of a living and breathing corpse, as one translation puts it. It is dynamic detachment, full engagement, full presence, but without the hook of personal outcome pulling at every decision. The verse immediately following, 2.48, names what this quality feels like when it operates. Yogastha kuru karmani, sangam tyaktva, dhananjaya, siddhi asiddhyo, samobhutva, samatvam yoga uchyate. Fixed in yoga, do thy work, O Dhananjaya, abandoning attachment, with an even mind in success and failure, for evenness of mind is called yoga. Samatvam yoga uchyate. Evenness of mind is called yoga. Not achievement, not renunciation, evenness. The word for this is samatva, and it operates as the effective signature of detachment. Not absence of feeling, but absence of lurching. The person of samatva is not stone. They simply do not pitch violently toward success or curl in on themselves at failure. Consider what this looks like in a life that has nothing to do with battlefield strategy. A woman in her mid-40s who has spent 3 years caring for her mother through a long illness, traveling back every other weekend, managing medications, making decisions her mother can no longer make clearly, reaches a moment when her mother dies anyway. The grief is real, but there is something else she notices beneath it. She never spent those 3 years calculating what she would get from having done this. She did not visit in order to be named in a will, or to be called a good daughter, or to be released from guilt. She visited because it was her mother, because it was what was asked of her. And in some quiet part of her experience, that distinction between caring without condition and caring for a return means that when the death comes, the grief is clean, heavy but clean. She is not also managing the collapse of a transaction. Krishna would say she was, without knowing the term, practicing niṣkāma karma, action without craving for fruit. Not because she read the Gita, because she held herself to the action itself rather than to what the action would produce. Niṣkāma karma, nish meaning without, kama desire, karma action, is the operative virtue that detachment makes possible in the world. It is the Gita's answer to the question of how a person can function fully in a world of consequence without being destroyed by consequence. And Krishna is precise about what produces its opposite. The cascade he describes in verses 2.62 and 2.63 has been called the ladder of fall. Dhyayato vishayan pumsa, sangas teshu pajayate, sangat sanjayate kama, kamat krodho bhijayate. As a man contemplates sense objects, attachment for them arises. From attachment, desire. From desire, anger. Krodhad bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibrama, smriti branshad buddhi nasho, buddhi nashat pranashyati. From anger comes delusion. From delusion, loss of memory. From loss of memory, the destruction of discrimination. And from that destruction, he perishes. Dhyana, contemplation of an object. Sangha, attachment. Kama, desire. Krodha, anger. Sammoha, delusion. Smrti vibhama, the scattering of memory. Buddhi nasha, the ruin of intelligence. And then pranashyati, he perishes. The sequence is psychological, not moral. It is not a list of sins. It is a description of a mechanism. You contemplate something repeatedly. You begin to cling to it. The clinging generates wanting. The wanting, when frustrated, generates rage. The rage disorders thought. The disordered thought cannot recall what it once understood. And the person who cannot remember what they once understood cannot distinguish real from unreal. At that point, something essential has been lost. The Buddhist resonance here is unmistakable. The chain has structural similarities to the Pali concept of dependent origination. But the Gita's answer is distinct. The Buddha might say, see through the object. The Gita says, act within the object's world, but do not stick. Arjuna himself asks Krishna at verse 2.54 what the steady-minded person looks like. How does the sthita prajna, one whose wisdom is fixed, sit, move, speak? Krishna's answer at 2:55, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan, partha manogatan, atmani evatmana tushta, sthita prajna stadocyate. When a person completely gives up all the desires of the mind, O Partha, and is satisfied within the self alone, by the self, then that person is called sthita prajna. The phrase atmani eva atmana tushta, content in the self, by the self, is not a description of isolation. It is a description of interior sufficiency. The sthita prajna does not require the outcome of any particular action in order to remain whole. This is not the same as having no preferences or caring for no one. Ramanuja, reading in the Vishishtadvaita tradition, understood the steadiness of the sthita prajna as inseparable from devotion. A person anchored in the divine sustains engagement with the world without being scattered by it. In Chapter 5, Krishna resolves the apparent tension Arjuna has been pressing, renunciation or action, which is better, with a formulation that is almost paradoxical. Verse 5.3, Jneyaha sa nitya sannyasi yo na dveshti na kankshati. The one who never feels abhorrence and has no desires is to be known as a true renunciate. The eternal renunciant is not wearing the robes of the renunciant. The eternal renunciant is the person who, while raising children, tending to a sick parent, maintaining a marriage through years of difficulty, earning a wage that does not quite feel sufficient, does all of it without the psychological scaffolding of hating what is and desperately needing what might be. No dvesha, no aversion, no kanksha, no craving. That is liberation, says Krishna, not the act of leaving. And then there is the oddest concession in Chapter 6, which I find one of the most psychologically generous moments in the entire text. Arjuna says plainly, the mind is restless, violent, powerful, stubborn. Taming it seems to me as difficult as taming the wind. Krishna does not correct him. Verse 6.35, Asangshayam mahabaho mano durnigraham chalam, abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena cha grihyate. Without doubt, O mighty armed one, the mind is difficult to restrain and restless. But by practice, abhyasa, and by dispassion, vairagya, it can be caught. Abhyasa and vairagya, practice and dispassion, the same pairing that Patanjali would later encode in Yoga Sutra 112. Practice is the